Welcome back to episode 4 of the Step Teachers Isolation Diaries. I'm joined today by returning guest Chris Kinread, and I'm also joined by special guest Gary Moore from the Regent High School. So Gary, tell us a little bit about the Regent High School.
Thank you, Aidan. Hi, Chris, and good afternoon, everyone. Regent High School is a mixed comprehensive school right in the heart of central London, walking distance from King's Cross and Euston. We are medium-sized school. We have about 1,030 on roll, including 155 in the sixth form. The school in the last 4 or 5 years has undertaken quite a rapid period of improvement. We are now the first choice for local families. We're oversubscribed. Results have been improving year on year at both GCSE level 2 and A level and level 3. Behaviour is good. We were Ofsted. I lost Ofsted a little while ago now, January 2018, but improvements have continued since then. As a consequence of that improvement, we've got quite a low turnover of staff. I appreciate this year things are slightly different, but we've only actually got 1 member of staff leaving at the end of the academic year. We've got excellent links locally. Our location allows for that. So we've got excellent links with we've got excellent links with ASCL, Professional Development, Women Ed, and the National College. We really believe in our staff. We develop staff well. We've got a fantastic CPD programme. And each year we put 3 or 4 of our support staff, usually TAs, but only TAs, through the teaching apprenticeship programme. So last year we had 3 NQTs. This year we've got 1 that went through that teaching apprenticeship programme.
So Gary is one of the first school leaders that I worked with when I entered recruitment. So automatically, if I'm in a meeting with Gary, I regress about 6 years before I knew nothing. And everything I've learned, I think Gary has taught me, but he clearly hasn't taught me everything he knows, because he's moved schools since we started working together and built done great things with the school he's had. And I would say I'm really happy that he's come on our podcast, and I don't think he'd say about himself, he's a very forward-thinking head teacher. Using the apprenticeship levy to train staff and bring teachers into the system is the tip of the iceberg. And prior to COVID-19, I know you've done a lot of work to get that retention up, about holding meetings and putting your staff's mental health at paramount, and they're important, making sure they knew how important they were to you and your school. What are you doing whilst I assume clearly you're in the office at school, but what are your staff in school as well? What are you doing to keep the cohesiveness of your staff together?
That's a really good point, Chris, because back in mid-March, when the Secretary of State announced that all schools would close, it actually meant all schools remain open, and we have remained open to those vulnerable pupils and to the children of key workers. So consequently, we've had staff in on a rota basis, including me, so that we've cut down on movement. The pupils that we've had in have been doing those online activities, activities on not just Show My Homework, which I know has been the go-to, but also things like Hegarty Maths and other platforms that we use as well. So that's what's been going on in school, and that rota has meant that staff have been able to cut down on their travel and cut down on and exercise their social distancing with their families. In terms of keeping the momentum and keeping the school going, staff welfare, staff well-being is important to all of us here at the school. I meet with my senior leadership team every day on Zoom. We've also had 2 full staff meetings so that we can meet together. Mini teams have been meeting, so the maths faculty would meet, or the performing arts faculty would meet. I've also heard on the grapevine that there have been webcam parties and quizzes So staff wellbeing has continued, which is fantastic. And in terms of the other head teachers, in fact, after this podcast, I've got another meeting with the secondary heads across Camden. I had a meeting with primary and secondary heads twice this week to talk about the recovery and renewal as we out of lockdown, which I'm sure you're going to ask me about in a few minutes. But in terms of what's going on in the school, we've had those vulnerable pupils, the children of key workers, but we have, of course, had a great many more pupils working at home, accessing those online resources. And so we have had to monitor that, and staff have had to monitor that, quite rigorously. But for vulnerable families who've chosen not to send their children into school, heads of year have made regular welfare calls and welfare checks. And all of that has carried on in the background. So, as I said a few minutes ago, all schools being closed has actually meant that schools have continued to run and continue to be the heart of the community. Yeah.
No, them remaining closed was a little bit misleading, as I'm sure the fact where you're shooting this from will make that abundantly clear to everyone, I think. Is there anything, because you've touched on Show My Homework, which if you can bear to, I don't think everyone watching this podcast will know what that is. Is there any other technology, is there anything else from working remotely that you think you will keep once we discover whatever normal is after the next one?
One of the things I said in a letter to staff 3 or 4 weeks ago is that the phrase, the new normal, this is the way that people are going to work now, we're going to work from home. I don't think that this can ever be the new normal in schools. Schools thrive on social interaction. Schools are far more than just a facilitator of information and a deliverer of a curriculum. Schools are catering, that we are closing the gap on social skills, on the way that people interact with each other that will stay with them for the rest of their life, regardless of what GCSEs, A levels, or other qualifications they get. So I'm very clear that this can never be the new normal. But in terms of learning, I'll talk about this in two parts, into the students and staff. In terms of the students, we're using Show My Homework, which is an online learning platform where work can be uploaded by teachers, children can access it online, it can be marked, feedback can be given. There are other platforms as well. I've mentioned Hegarty Maths. There's loads of stuff that we are using, and I would urge your viewers, if you're not familiar with Regent High School, have a look at our website. That has been our window on the world, where families and their children have been accessing all those sources. But in terms of our staff, I think some of the new technology has been great. I've had another one next week, meetings with governors. And one of the things I'm going to be urging my body to do is to, full governing body meetings, I think still should take place in school and still should take place face-to-face. But some of the committee meetings, I think, could now happen as we're meeting now. Rather than people come in from all over London for a meeting here in Regent High School at 5:30, we will be able, using Zoom or other webcam-based software, we would be able to have those meetings and report on those policies remotely. I think there will always be a case. As human beings, we are social animals. I think there will always be a case for us wanting to meet face to face. But I do think the learning, that will come away from this will be around the staff, will be around, nothing will replace the social interaction between students and between staff and students.
No, that's great. Well, I suppose you are in, and what we agreed that you come here to talk about, I should give you the opportunity to, Gary. So you're in the unenviable task, I suppose, of responding to the meagre words of Boris Johnson when he announced that and made it feel like secondary schools weren't open, which you've already touched on. But there are, of course, lots of government papers that then follow that with guidelines and action plans and everything else you're supposed to put in place. Obviously, that's a little more challenging if you're a school in central London, where public transport is going to be a routine, I'd imagine, for lots of your pupils. How far have you got with that planning? And yeah, I'll leave it open-ended for you, really.
Well, as you've said, Chris, the announcement on Sunday was very, very clear, in as much as that from that announcement, reception in year 1 and year 6, we're going to look to go back on the 1st of June. And I think many head teachers, myself included, were sort of, we're almost breathing a sigh of relief that, maybe we wouldn't need to plan for opening as early as June. What came out of some of the background papers and the command paper that was presented to Parliament on Monday was actually, in terms of secondary schools, there would be some, and I think the phrasing was some face-to-face time between year 10 and year 12. So what we're looking to do, we're still in the very early stages of planning this, is to look at ways that we can bring year 10 in small groups to have some time with their teachers. But that won't be full classes, that won't be following a normal curriculum, that will be smaller groups, initially focusing on the gap in English and maths, because one of the things I think we're worried about as a profession is that many students will have done quite a lot of work online, but won't have done any writing perhaps at home. And then there will be a significant number that haven't done any serious reading. So we will concentrate on English and maths first. We will make the groups small so that we can have social distancing in schools. There's a number, 15 is mentioned on the DFE website. We will have far, far fewer than 15 in a classroom, because I've got the luxury of a large secondary school building. Excuse me, there's the bell. I have the luxury of a large secondary school building that's designed for 1,100 pupils. A head teacher of a small primary school out in the Shires hasn't got that luxury, but I will look to have single figures in a room, 8 or 9 pupils in a room, and the priority to begin with will be English and maths. Targeting year 10, because they haven't really got any flexibility. Year 10 follow a curriculum that is going to, that covers 30 periods in a week. Year 12 will also have that face time in much smaller groups, but there's a lot more flexibility around year 12, because of course year 12 don't study their 3 A-levels across 30 periods. They do have some free time. They can be set other work that can be done, even if they can't access it online. That can involve reading. Once we've managed to hit all of year 10, and if we get to that point by the end of June, we will then go through the cycle again, so that every child will have had more than just one session in school. We should try and hit the whole of year 10 at least twice, if not 3 times, by the end of the summer term. But we're doing a lot more than just planning for June the 1st, because even though the position is not clear for Key Stage 3 students, what is going to happen, I'm convinced, is that all schools will be open to all students by September. And so what we're doing, we're not just going to pick up where we left off in March. That would be absolutely crazy. So I'm looking at the moment on redesigning what we're calling a recovery curriculum. And again, I mentioned English and maths. We are freeing up some time so that particularly year 7 and year 11 get more time for English, because we are worried about levels of literacy coming from Key Stage 2. And as I said to my head of English yesterday, she is going to have to prepare students for 2 English language and English literature, for 2 GCSEs, and is going to have to cover 4 terms work in 3 terms. What we're doing is we're providing an extra period of English for year 7. We're going to provide an extra period of English for year 11. I again find myself talking about maths. We're going to be providing an extra period of maths for year 9 and year 10. So we're trying to redesign that recovery transition curriculum so that we can close the gap that the last 5 or 6 months, by the time we get to September, close that gap that this last period out of school has opened up.
Yeah. How do you think that the year 10s, the year 12s, even your leavers now, or your year 11s, how do you think that generation is going to be affected by this?
Well, I think there will inevitably be, people talk about the mental health crisis, and I think there will inevitably be individuals and groups who are bruised. I want to say damaged. I want to say bruised by what's happening at the moment. And that is something that we do extremely at Regent High School. We have a brief therapy that we buy into from the local CAMS at the Tavistock Centre. So that is something that we do very, very well anyway. What I don't want to get bogged down with here is having too much emphasis on a welfare curriculum, because it might be a short-term sticking plaster that might fix a short-term problem. But what these students, the very students that you've mentioned, Chris, the leavers, the 16-year-olds, what they will need to ensure that they don't have a mental health crisis when they're 20 or 30 or 40 is a good all-round education. And all the welfare curriculum in the world, all the PSHE, all the relationships and sex education, that will not make up for a good, broad and balanced curriculum, which is why my focus from September, my focus from June the 1st, is going to be on English and maths.
Well, yeah, I think that also builds resilience. I have a feeling that when we track this generation, they might end up being very successful, because they will have nothing will have come to them on a plate. They will have had to work, and they would have to really strive to get somewhere. I think they might end up. We won't be saying about whatever we call this generation, as we have the millennials, unfairly in my opinion, that they're snowflakes. I think that they will be much more hardy perennials, particularly under how much work you've done to prop up their curriculum. I think, yeah, it's astounding. I didn't expect the head teachers to have gone so far with the planning, because they didn't have the guidelines, but it just goes to show what is happening behind the scenes.
Well, I mean, it's what we do, I mean, I don't think anybody comes into this job, without their eyes wide open. I think none of us expected, to be in a situation where we were closing the school at the end of March. None of us did. In fact, my deputy left school that day to take up a headship elsewhere. So he had the daunting prospect of starting his headship in his new school with school. But I mean, one of the things that we have to do, and I have a great sense of moral purpose on this, is to lead from the front and lead by example. And that's what we've tried to do. But I haven't done that on my own. I've got an extremely capable senior leadership team around me, support me, whilst I'm supporting them and supporting families and supporting our students. My senior leadership team are supporting me. It was really, really good to, we have a middle leadership team meeting once a fortnight, and it was great to see the work that they are doing. And let me assure you and reassure your viewers and listeners that everybody here is pulling their weight. And my view is that when we clap for carers on a Thursday evening, we are clapping for the teachers and applauding the great things that have been going on in schools, as much as we've been applauding the great things that have been going on in the NHS. Because I'm going to say it a third time, all schools being closed actually translated to all schools remaining open.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, pillars of the community too. Yes, no, and I'm certainly clapping for everyone who's out there keeping the lights on. It's been humbling to realise who the key workers really are, and the people who are out there doing jobs at the moment. They're the ones who are important to our society, really, I think.
Thank you.
I did have a question, but it was mostly more about social distancing. And I just wanted to know, has the government been clear with you on how to maintain social distancing in classrooms?
There's guidance. They actually provided a checklist, and that is available on the DFE website. There is guidance, but it's very much for schools to interpret for themselves what is appropriate for their setting. Because as I've already said, if I'm bringing small groups of year 10 in, and I've got, and Chris knows from numerous visits to Regent High School, I've got the space to do it. But if you're the head teacher of an infant school, never mind a primary school, we tend to think, the model in London is very much, the primary and secondary, but in some boroughs, in some counties, the model is, infants, juniors, and then a high school. If you're the head teacher of an infant school that's being asked to bring in reception year 1 and year 2, that's the whole school. So how that will look in her setting or his setting is going to be very different to how it looks in my setting. So there's no simple answer, Aidan. There is guidance, but it's down to individual head teachers to interpret that guidance and decide what is best for their school and their setting, which, to be honest, is what we do every day. I mean, I always say I do not make decisions in the school for Ofsted or for the local authority or to enhance people's careers. I make decisions in school because it's right for the children. And the decisions that we'll be making in this school when year 10 come back on June the 1st, will be right for our school. And that will include social distancing to protect both the students, but also the responsibility that I have to my staff.
Good.
I think that's all. That's all the questions I had.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you've covered everything, and I'm just conscious of the time. I know you had another meeting that you mentioned. That,
3 o'clock. I'm meeting the secondary heads at 3 o'clock. We had a joint primary secondary meeting on Monday and another one today with people there from Public Health England. This really is a joint effort, not just across Camden, but certainly in terms of Public Health England, we work with Islington. So this really is a joint effort. We're working with professional associations. I met with the two NEU reps that work here in the school. I have regular updates from my association, ASCL. This really is a combined effort across the whole piece of the education sector. Yeah, no, it's astounding, really, the things that they've done. No, well, thank you very much, Gary, because it's been really insightful. It's much more useful to have somebody yourself who knows than our guest work. So I really appreciate the time that you've given to this, and I really appreciate the time you've given to your community and your teachers as well. Thank you. It means a lot to all of us. Good to see you, Chris. Nice to meet you, Aidan. You too. Thank you. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.